terror from the sky. A nation remembers how life stood still after the deadly attacks 13 years ago today. Booed off the stage. Christians shout down Senator Ted Cruz, and our Jason Calvi caught the clash on video. Papal message. Pope Francis to address the European Parliament later this year. And the broken spoke. A Texas honky-tonk that's attracted some big names celebrates 50 years. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Thursday, September 11th, 2014. Good evening from Washington. Thank you for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick with your news now. The shadow of a new terror threat hangs over today's observances of the 13th anniversary of the September 11th terrorist attacks. On the morning after announcing a stepped-up offensive against Islamic State militants, the White House paused to remember. Nearly 3,000 Americans died that fateful morning 13 years ago. Terrorists hijacked 4 jets, crashing them in New York, Pennsylvania, and here in Washington. At the Pentagon this morning, the president focused on America's resilience.
13 years after small and hateful minds conspired to break us, America stands tall and America stands proud.
At the World Trade Center site in New York, family and friends read the names of the thousands who died. The Memorial Plaza was closed to the public for most of the day, open only to family members. Near Shanksville, Pennsylvania, former House Speaker Dennis Hastert affirmed the courage of Flight 93's passengers and crew. Had they not resisted the hijackers, he said, the U.S. Capitol may have been destroyed that day as well. Many Catholics are marking today's anniversary with prayer for the victims and their families. At masses across the country, the faithful are being encouraged to work for peace in the world. Wyatt Goolsby reports from the Basilica of the National Shrine here in Washington. Wyatt?
Brian, Catholic communities here in the U.S. are also offering prayers for the nation in light of the recent threats from terrorists in the Middle East. For many of the faithful, it's no coincidence that today's gospel message of loving your enemies comes on this anniversary.
A day of recollection and reflection at the Basilica of the National Shrine. Catholics attending Mass joined together in asking for God's blessing on all those directly affected by 9/11, including those who lost their lives.
It's really important that we intercede for them, for their souls, because, they have passed on to the next life, and we believe that they are in God's hands now. So we want to ask Him, please, to take care of them.
Monsignor Vito Bonanno was in New York that day.
I can remember smelling the devastation for weeks.
In the days and weeks following the attacks, he ministered to families from the parish he was serving in Queens at the time. He says prayer is vital, not just on today's anniversary, but every day.
And it's not healed by one prayer service, as we all know. It is a lifelong, ongoing moment, as people here can experience and remember, as I do.
Every day you have to remember, morning, noon, and night, to thank God for being here.
As a former flight attendant for American Airlines, Norita Beeman knew many of the crew members killed on 9/11. For her, it's a daily reminder to keep praying.
I'd always try to come in early before my shift starts at 12 to run in and just to say thank you, Father, for another day, because we never know. We really never know.
It has been a tough day for a lot of people. Out of respect for the victims in New York, Washington, and Pennsylvania, every year the Basilica hangs a 30 by 50-foot flag there from the Knights Tower. One other thing to note here tonight, Monsignor Vito here at the Basilica also tells me that even today, with people that he knows from New York, he regularly talks with some family and friends of victims who are still dealing with grief even today. Brian.
Wyatt Goolsby, thank you. There appears to be bipartisan support for President Obama's call for new authority to destroy the Islamic State terror group. The president is authorizing airstrikes over Iraq and now Syria, and sending nearly 500 more troops to Iraq to help Iraqi security forces. In a primetime address, he spelled out the U.S. mission against the Islamic State.
Our objective is clear. We will degrade and ultimately destroy ISIL through a comprehensive and sustained counterterrorism strategy.
The president asked lawmakers to approve training and arming moderate rebels battling ISIS and the Assad government. He says Iraqi and other friendly forces will combat the threat at the ground level, not U.S. troops.
As I've said before, these American forces will not have a combat mission. We will not get dragged into another ground war in Iraq.
Today, lawmakers on both sides of the political aisle are generally receptive to the president's goals.
What the president has asked for, as the commander-in-chief, is this authority to train these Syrian rebels. And frankly, we ought to give the president what he's asking for.
But Obama's critics say his strategy isn't enough.
I will be glad to support the president if I am convinced that this is robust enough and strong enough and serious enough that to really bring about a favorable result. I'm not convinced of that yet.
Fleitz is a former CIA analyst and senior fellow with the Center for Security Policy, and David Drucker, senior congressional correspondent for the Washington Examiner. So what kind of support do you gentlemen think that the president should seek here?
Well, I think that what you're going to see the president ask for is authority to train and arm the Syrian rebels. That's what he wants Congress to provide him. He does not want to ask them for authority to use military force broadly. And I think we'll find out next week whether the president gets what he asks for or whether this thing goes a different direction after members have more time to reconsider his request.
Fred, is this different from the last round of Iraq and Syria? Are we at war now?
Brian, I think we are at war, and it's ironic that on the anniversary of 9/11, a president who said he was going to get us out of wars is getting us into another one. Now, I actually agree with the president that we have to attack ISIS. It is such a serious threat. The murders, the rapes, the expansion that it is doing, it is destabilizing the region. But the president has had to change his policies in reaction to a very significant change in global events. And I think we are at war.
So he said no boots on the ground. Can he stick to that? Should he stick to it?
Well, I think in the short term, he's going to stick to it because the American public isn't hungry to put more Army and traditional boots on the ground. And you're not going to find a lot of support for that in Congress, not on either side of the aisle. But as Fred and I have talked about, there are boots on the ground that are Americans, and there are going to be more. They're just not going to have the traditional Army flag on them.
What does this mean for the Assad regime, Fred?
That's really a key question, Brian. And the president was trying to say yesterday that we are going to bolster the Syrian rebels and they're going to help us attack the Assad regime. That's not what's going on. The president had to choose between two evils, and he chose the lesser of two evils. One evil was letting ISIS thrive and grow. The other was destroying ISIS, knowing that he will have to bolster the Assad regime. There's no middle ground here. The Syrian rebels are not really a factor. They have been infiltrated by radical Islamists, and he had to make a difficult decision. I think it's the right one, but he did not level with the American people that this decision means that we are going to keep Assad in power.
And I think that's the concern that members of Congress have. Even members who are going to vote for this and have told me they're going to vote for this, when they really look at the strategy to train and arm the Syrian rebels, what they think ultimately will happen is that the Syrian rebels, even if they mean well, won't be up to the task of fighting ISIS. And these are some hardened terrorist forces. And then what happens when they get overrun by ISIS is the equipment we've given them, the arms we've given them, could end up in the hands of ISIS and used against us. And that is the kind of thing that is driving the no votes that are there. Ultimately, I think that the president will get the authority because you'll end up with Republicans and Democrats coming together to provide enough votes to get this through. But there's a real concern among the people who know the intelligence that if that is the strategy as presented, it won't work.
Fred, very quickly, will our allies come through on this? What can we expect from them?
I think we'll get some support from some allies. I think some regional allies will help us. But we really need help from European allies, and there is hesitancy on behalf of many of them. The president has to get the British, the French, the Germans, especially the British, to help us, because I think we will need more than just advisors on the ground. I think we will need commandos to attack ISIS locations both in Iraq and Syria. That's going to mean help from European allies.
Very challenging. And thank you both, Fred Fleitz, David Tucker. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
And now some of the other stories our EWTN News Nightly team has been covering in today's world. A South African judge has ruled out a murder conviction for Oscar Pistorius in the shooting death of his girlfriend. The double amputee Olympian admits firing the shots that killed Riva Steenkamp last year. He claims he mistook her for an intruder and fired in self-defense. The judge is expected to deliver a verdict tomorrow. In a preview today, she said Pistorius was negligent and used excessive force, but cast doubt on witnesses' accounts.
This court is in a fortunate position in that it has objective evidence in the form of technology, which is more reliable than human perception and human memory.
With no trial by jury in South Africa, it is the judge who will decide the verdict. Pistorius could still go to prison for a maximum of 15 years if he is convicted of culpable homicide. Another Ebola outbreak is thought to have killed nearly 36 people in Congo. The World Health Organization says it is not related to the outbreak in West Africa, blamed for more than 2,200 deaths. Congo, the site of the world's first recorded Ebola outbreak, has had several flare-ups of this disease over the years. The UN Health Agency says all the cases in Congo have been linked to one initial case. Isolation units have been set up in each of the 4 affected villages. Well, 24 bishops from Congo met with the Holy Father today. Every 5 years, the church sends its shepherds to visit the successor of St. Peter in Rome. They give an account of the condition of their particular churches and receive the Holy Father's counsel. These visits are designed to keep the members of the church connected with its divinely appointed head. The president of Tunisia met in private audience with Pope Francis at the Vatican today. The Holy See says the 2 leaders discussed promoting peace, interreligious dialogue, and human rights. The defense of freedom of conscience, religious liberty, and the rejection of all forms of violence also came up in the discussions. Pope Francis and the president paid special attention to the situation in the Mediterranean basin during today's meeting. Pope Francis will make an official visit to the European Parliament in Strasbourg in late November. EU Parliament President Martin Schulz says the Pope will address the European lawmakers in an official session of Parliament. The Vatican confirmed the date, November 25th, for that visit. Italian media reports Francis is also considering a 2-day trip to Turkey to mark an important Orthodox holiday on November 30th. Those plans have not been confirmed by the Vatican. To date, there hasn't been an official invitation from the Turkish government. Coming up, on the hot seat, the NFL commissioner works to restore the league's credibility, especially with women. And after 50 years, a Texas honky-tonk still draws big names and huge crowds. Remembering the families of the victims of 9/11 on this 13th anniversary of the terrorist attacks. Thank you for joining us on EWTN News Nightly. I'm Brian Patrick, and Senator Ted Cruz is booed at a Middle Eastern Christian summit here in Washington. Our Jason Calvi broke the story late last night and joins us now with more. Jason?
You know, Brian, for days, Christian patriarchs, Catholic bishops, Orthodox bishops put aside their theological differences, uniting to stand for persecuted Christians in the Middle East. But what happened last night put a temporary rift in the unity.
Christians have no greater ally than the Jewish state.
Republican Senator Ted Cruz receiving heckles and boos at the In Defense of Christians dinner. Eventually, Cruz decided to leave the stage.
If you will not stand with Israel and the Jews, then I will not stand with you. Thank you, and God bless you.
Maronite Bishop Gregory Mansour watched the scene unfold last night.
I didn't want him to leave upset, and so I ran after him.
And the bishop addressed the audience of more than 1,000 after Cruz left.
Communion and togetherness is not perfect, but it's still good.
And summit organizers say the booing was wrong.
We have a tradition. When you have a guest, you respect your guest. Sometimes your guests make mistakes. You don't kick him.
Cruz issued a statement following the speech saying it unfortunately deteriorated into a shameful display of bigotry and hatred. I spoke in strong support of Israel and the Jewish people who are being persecuted and murdered by the same vicious terrorists who are also slaughtering Christians. Sadly, a vocal and angry minority of attendees at the conference tried to shout down my expression of solidarity with Israel. But summit attendees disagree with Cruz's characterization.
We do not hate Jews. Absolutely, positively not.
This place is not filled with hatred. It's not filled with bigotry. Yes, there's some hurt feelings, but this is an amazing communion. And that should be what we take from this.
And attendees say they're here to promote unity for Christians everywhere, despite political or theological differences.
There is a sense of unity, a sense of support for the Christians of the Middle East.
And today, 8 patriarchs and bishops met with President Barack Obama at the White House. During the historic 40-minute meeting, they discussed protecting Christians in the Middle East. And Brian, they also met with the National Security Advisor as well at the White House today.
Excellent coverage. Thank you, Jason. Former FBI Director Robert Mueller will conduct a probe into the NFL's handling of the former Ravens running back Ray Rice case. Rice is facing domestic violence allegations after video shows him punching and knocking out his then-fiancée on an elevator. The NFL claims the league hadn't seen the video until this week, but a law enforcement official says NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell sent the video to an NFL executive 5 months ago. Goodell says the NFL is working to gain back credibility, especially with women.
We're trying to do the right thing at all times. When we make a mistake, we're honest about it, and we're open about it, and say we're going to work at it, do better.
Goodell recently announced a new policy for domestic violence convictions. A player will be suspended for 6 games if convicted once and suspended indefinitely for a second offense. Here is a warning: if you have a Gmail account, 5 million Gmail addresses and passwords are showing up on a Russian digital forum. But Google says its servers were not breached. The list appears to be a collection of passwords from previous hacks. Google is warning users to take steps to protect their Gmail accounts, like creating stronger passwords. Well, if you want to dance in Texas, you've got to visit the Broken Spoke. As Catherine Elliott reports, country fans come to the Austin honky tonk from all over the world.
Welcome to the last of the true Texas dance halls.
Once you come inside here, you know during the way you're not at Carnegie Hall. You know you're in a real honky tonk.
Where people of all ages and nationalities enjoy dancing to old school country music.
I like it because of this traditional music and the place, and it's very, very fun, yeah.
50 years ago, James White finished his Army service and opened the Broken Spoke, a honky-tonk featuring the country music he loved since childhood.
You always want to remember and be in the moment of yesterday, and that's what the Spoke is. It represents that. Because you walk in, there's nothing changed since 1964 when he opened.
A big draw for tourists. Texas travel guides often suggest the Capitol building, a Longhorns game, and a visit to the Broken Spoke, as don't miss Austin experiences. Guests like country star Willie Nelson are immortalized in the room White calls his tourist trap.
Here's me and Willie and my grandson, my daughter Jenny, and my son-in-law Mike here.
While time doesn't appear to change inside the Broken Spoke, the modern apartment complexes that surround it represent the new Austin and its growing population.
I was perfectly happy before they came here. I mean, eventually I'll have 500 people to draw from that live real close.
And once inside, they'll be ready to dance all night. Catherine Elliott, EWTN News Nightly.
Up next, as the nation remembers, a former ambassador to the Holy See reflects on the terror of September 11th. On this Thursday, September the 11th, we pray for peace, honoring those who served to protect us from harm, and remembering those who died 13 years ago today. It's an honor to be joined by Jim Nicholson, the former U.S. ambassador to the Holy See, former U.S. Secretary of Veterans Affairs. We'll reflect on 9/11 with you in just a moment. But first, you're uniquely qualified, both as a Catholic and with your military background. What do you think of President Obama's strategy to go after the Islamic State?
Well, I'm pleased that he's at least developed a strategy and seems to be paying more attention to a very serious situation. I don't want to sound too pessimistic, but I think there's still a lot of wishfulness in his plan. I mean, to say that counterinsurgency is going to work there like it has in Yemen and Somalia is a folly. It hasn't worked there at all. And it's very hard to do counterinsurgency. I was in Vietnam as an infantry ranger, and you've got to have some boots on the ground. And if we can't get the local allies, you know, the Syrian moderate rebels and Iraqi army, if they don't coalesce and come together and be those boots, then I don't see it working, because you certainly are not going to be able to win this thing from the air, just you know, dropping things out of planes and drones.
And to get all those forces together, it's going to take strong leadership. Do we have that?
We don't have it. I mean, Obama is really, I think, too little, too late. I mean, he's not ever wanted to be bothered with this nuisance of national security and foreign affairs. He's kind of wanted that just to sort of go away and concentrate on the domestic issues and domestic politics, which he's pretty good at. He's a pretty darn good domestic politician. But he's the commander-in-chief, and he's responsible, number one, for our security, the security of the people of the United States. And he's taken an oath to do that, and he's never given that the attention and the leadership that it requires in this world that we're in today.
As Catholics, can U.S. intervention against a force like the Islamic State, can that be justified?
It can.
And it should.
It can, sure. You know, there are the limitations in the doctrine and the catechism, and has to be proportional, has to have a reasonable chance of being successful, and then it has to be about achieving peace and not conquest. And when the U.S. engages, we're usually always compliant with those requirements, and he is responsible for the common good, for the security of our people, and they have vowed that they're, you know, want to ultimately come after the Americans, and so that's the moral case for him taking these steps to try to protect us. But he's pretty late. He allowed a big vacuum to develop there when he came out of Iraq and didn't go into Syria, and so it's a tough situation. I think we all need to get behind him and hope that it's successful.
And pray for peace in the
pray.
process. Yes. Ambassador Nicholson, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Always a pleasure.
Ambassador Jim Nicholson was named to represent the Holy See just after 9/11. In fact, he talked about how the Holy Father, very elderly at that point, was so fragile, and he was very, very upset by what happened on the 11th of September 2001, and asked Nicholson to try to do what he could as a representative of the American government to bring about peace. And I remember what I was doing that morning. I was working in a newsroom that morning, just finished a network cut in, and we were watching live as the second building in New York was hit. And then, of course, the news came in that the Pentagon here in Washington had been struck, and then the plane 93, the United 93, crashing in western Pennsylvania. It was all so surreal, and I think it's very important that we kind of keep in mind all those American lives that have been offered up for peace in these past 13 years. So we would ask all of you to pray for those who protect our country, and especially keep in prayer the victims, their families, and that we would pray for peace. So as we leave you tonight on this September 11th, 2014, we look back at the remembrances today that honored all of those who perished on September 11th, 2001. May they rest in peace.
Generations from now, no matter the trial, no matter the challenge, America will always be America.
Carl Francis Asaro.
Michael A. Asiak.
Michael Edward Asher.
Janice Marie Ashley.
If it wasn't for those heroes on that plane who are consecrated here in this hillside, probably the capital of the United States would have been the target and destroyed by that terrorist act.